Hey guys, welcome back to Unlimited Projects. I have working on the 98 3500 HD Chevrolet truck as the heater fan kicks on. Changing out rear rotors, full floating Dana 80. I'm going to show you real quick here. You'll see I have all the studs out of the wheels. The hub, the rotor are attached. Best way, I'll cover the how I got this off in a second. But this is the rear disc brake assembly. Take a brass hammer, see the divot I have in that one? Put it on top of your wheel stud. These are already knocked out and I just threw them back in. Place it there and hold it there with one hand. With your other hand, I'll do this while holding the camera. Take your big hammer and hit right on top of the brass hammer while holding it with this hand. Hit the top of that brass hammer with your big hammer. That, boom, on top of the brass while you have it on top of the stud. 10 studs in these wheels. Give them a couple of shots. They're splined, but they will all blow out then. And you won't damage them because your brass hammer takes the brunt of the abuse. On top of the stud with this, hit it with this. This is what the stud looks like coming out. So, and look, they don't get damaged because the brass hammer does absorbs the impact, so you don't damage your studs. Your big hammer's hitting on top. This is placed on the stud. Whack. 4 or 5 shots. These will blast out then. Then you flip it up. This thing is heavy. Watch your fingers. And you have to separate these two. Get a brass hammer. I gave it a couple shots. It comes apart. There's your rotor. There's the other one. I already did one side. And I thought I better make a video about this. I was getting a shudder. I was getting brake pulsation in the back. And you thought, how could this rotor warp? How could these rotors warp? This one's worn down pretty good. But I'll tell you what happened to this rotor. I've never seen this before. Right here. Every one of these vents is clear. Okay, you can see straight through. What happened was this weight that was installed from the factory got rusty and literally bulged this rotor. And it was like pulsating. I can't believe that the rust pushed that cast apart, but it will. So I just decided, okay, this one's kind of worn. This one was given a pulsation. I'm changing out the rotors. Do yourself a favor. When you buy the new rotors, paint these things, okay? You'll see it kind of goofy here, but it's mocked up. But I take high temp, flat black, and I paint all this and in every single one of these. You don't have to be fancy about it. I mean, I got some overspray. I'll clean it off later. But I run all the paint down in here. I even paint on the back side. I'll clean the surface off with some brake clean later, but all this paint will prevent that from rusting. Okay? I explained the studs. Now, you take your hub, and it's a messy job. Get ready. Your hub has all the bearings in it. That's the seal. That's the back side. And here's the front side where we pop the axle out. Hang on. Let me move to the bench. All right. Here we are up at the bench. Now, this is the HD 3500 Chevy. I love these trucks because they got tall frames on them. You guys know from my other videos, it has a 6.5 turbo diesel in it. I love this truck. Here's your little 5-lug cover. You take that off. Underneath it, you'll see the big axle shaft is here at the splines. The axle goes the whole way into the diff. All you can do is slide the axle out. Nothing's holding it in except the cover. Take the cover off. Your oil's going to run out then. I stuck a dowel in the end of the axle. Boom, slide the axle out, the whole way out. Then, don't kill yourselves. Get one of these sockets. It's got 6 fingers on it. These are what your nuts look like. This is an old bearing. Bearing, the plate, one of the nuts. Then they have this cage. And this is your outer nut. This is all in here. Pull your axle shaft out, exposes this nut. This cage will have a finger bent over and locked in one of these. If somebody's been in there, one of these fingers will be bent over and in one of these grooves that will prevent you from turning this loose or it coming loose. Reach in with your pliers. You pop one of these fingers. Hope you can see it okay. You pop one of these fingers of this little cage out. Your 6-point socket goes on. Loosen it. Now the outer nut comes off, and so does the cage. Cage is keyed, so the cage can't spin. It's keyed to the spindle coming through from the axle housing. That's out of your way. Take your socket, next nut, off the end of the spindle. Washer. Your bearings, that one is still in there. Your bearing does not come out like a regular. At that point, when you get your washer out, you have to remove the whole brake. You have to remove the hub, leave that bearing in there. It's not coming out because there's a steel slide in here that prevents that bearing from coming out because the bearing does not come out this way. You saw me just beat the brake rotor off. Knock your studs out, your brake rotor comes off. Now you're here on the bench. Everything is coming out the back of this. You're going to pull your seal. You're going to pull your outer bearing, or your inner bearing, I'm sorry. Then, reach through, and there is a big ring. There's a snap ring down in there. Let me get a light. You see those 2 fingers sticking up? The black ones right there and right there. Okay, can you see those? They're part of a snap ring that is holding the race for the outer bearing into the whole hub assembly. You are going to remove the seal, remove this bearing. Then you're going to reach down in with a big pliers and you're going to push these 2 together. Squeeze them together. They're going to pop. They're going to come out. Then flip it over. You're going to use your huge punch. That's a big one there. You're down through here. And you're not going to knock your inner race out. This is the outer. That's the inner. You're going to knock your inner race out. Then you're going to take that ring out. That ring, the snap ring I showed you. Once that ring is out, there's your 2. They're pointed straight up this way so you can grab them with the pliers. 1, 2. Squeeze them together. That pops out. Once that's out of the way, you're going to come in here with the big dowel, and there's a sleeve here. You're going to find that slot in this sleeve. That slot will move. That sleeve rotates in here, which allows you to get your punch down on the race of your bearing. Okay? You have to beat that race and this bearing out that direction. Then, once your bearing falls out, here's the bearing out of the old one. Your bearing goes out the bottom. This sleeve will come out. This sleeve right here. See, it's move a little bit. It's just stuck in there. That has these teeth right here that keep that bearing. There's teeth there that keeps that bearing in its race. It's not coming out this way, it's going that way. Everything's going out that way. Pull this sleeve out after the bearing comes out and clean it up. But don't forget to put this sleeve back in. That's the first thing that's got to go back in from the other end, is this sleeve with these teeth to hold this bearing into its race. Now, this is a rear hub. It does have oil in it from the diff. Comes up and grabs these bearings. I don't care. I use a high temp grease. Get a good bearing packer. I've had this bearing packer for 20 years. This is when you use a good bearing packer hooked up to your grease gun and you squeeze it, it pushes the grease all the way through those needle bearings. See it coming out right in between the needle bearings. You could pack by hand all day and you wouldn't get this pack this good, and this takes less than 5 minutes. For this bearing packer, you hook your grease gun up to it, take good high quality wheel bearing grease, run it through these bearings. When you drop them in here and you clean this, wash this all out, drop your bearings in here, your new bearings in with fresh grease, and reassemble it on the truck with your nuts. After you put your new brake rotor back on, the problem you might run into, here's the old bearings. See the grooves in them? They were starting to break through the outer tough, the treated layer of the bearing. Yeah, see, that one was really bad. That's the outer. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, see how it was burning through there? Those are the old ones. They're junk. Off the other side. The seal. Here's what the original seal looks like. It's a quality piece. Part numbers. Get your part numbers off your bearings and then go match them up, because they used a lot of different combinations. You need your original bearings one side, take them out, match the part numbers up, and get the exact replacements. That's what I did. Same with the seal number, okay? But this seal is of lesser quality. These seals with the little spring around them, as soon as you tap this, sometimes these springs fly off. Get yourself your clean bearing grease. Put it over the spot here so it grabs that spring and holds it in there, okay? Just pile some in there. When you hit this seal with a hammer, this little spring that's around this thing won't fly off and be in there, and your seal won't seal. That helps that seal last longer. You don't want that spring pinching that seal to come off. Put the grease on it, hold it in place. Pack your bearings good. The thing you might run into that you might need help with a machine shop, I have a huge air over hydraulic press that I use. When you go to put the new rotor on, and you have to put those studs back in, they're big, they're heavy. You end up putting it in a press, and I press these wheel studs back in. Don't try drawing them in with lug nuts. They are big. You know, put your rotor on. Hammer your studs in as good as you can from the back side after you put your new races in with a brass punch. And again, you're putting everything in from the back side. See how big your opening is? Put your new races in the order you took them out. With your bearings, knock your new seal in. Put your rotor on. Now you have to press your studs back in. That you might have to go to a machine shop for. I use my huge press. I press them all the way in. The rotor sits on top. This is the back side. The rotor sits on top here. And then your studs press in. You're going to end up using a huge press or a machine shop press and have them press those studs in until they're seated the whole way. Reassemble everything back on the truck with your washer first on your outer bearing. Washer first. This is in the hub. But your outer bearing, you put your washer on. It's indexed with its tooth. You put on your first nut. Use the socket. Seat it down till it has no play in it on the spindle. It's nice and snug, but still spinning. I just use a ratchet and a 1/2 inch drive ratchet, and I just spin it a couple times, tension it, spin it a couple times, tension it. That'll seat your bearings in, and this thing will get this nice and snug, but yet this will still spin and have no free play in it. Cage and then outer nut. Snug this up with this, bend one tab over. Put your axle shaft in, then your cover goes on. You're done then. But seriously, you might have to take it to a machine shop to get this pressed, to get the wheel studs pressed back in with the rotor. It's a big job. Everything's heavy. Use the right tools. You shouldn't have a problem. That's it. Check back with me for the next project. I'm jumping all around here with different projects, but shoot me a comment if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, guys.